I believe one of the big issues this year, 2024, is going to be the battle over productive farmland and the need to construct massive solar and wind farms in rural and regional Australia. They won't be in the inner suburbs of our major capitals. Just this week, I again drove past a massive solar farm off the edge of the Hume Highway near Glenrowan, just over the border into Victoria. Massive it was. Now, joining me now is the new Farmers Federation Chief, David Jochinke. David, am I right to predict this is going to be a very big political issue this year?
I'd say it's already a political issue, to be quite honest, especially when we talk around transmission lines, which we have less ability to say no to, whereas renewables, at least the farmer themselves, have the ability to accept the deal. But the question of that is, should it be on prime land and is it the best location possible with some of the proposals that are being put forward? But it's the transmission line that we don't have any ability to talk about or have the ability to influence. And that, for us, is one of the greatest issues that we have around the planning, the location, and even the way that they are placed within the landscape to make sure that it's impacting the least on farmers and making sure that we are protecting that prime land.
Well, let's talk about transmission lines. I mean, my understanding is that one of the projects is to run a brand new transmission line from southern New South Wales down through farmland in Victoria, all the way down, I think, out the back of Ballarat or Bendigo. And there's already a big argument from many farmers who say, well, we simply don't want these things on our property. What happens when a farmer says no and the government insists that that's where it's going to go?
Well, this is the question about property rights. At the moment, the government actually can compulsory acquire that land and then put the actual any infrastructure they wish to be put on there. And so what we're asking is that farmers need to be consulted and have the same gravitas as native vegetation and even Indigenous on their land to be able to say, well, this isn't good enough for us. It's going to affect our farming practices. The other option might be is to put it down a major road or alongside the major road so it is at the edge of the paddock, and at least then we're not having our paddocks cut up, stopping us from doing the productive systems that we currently have adopted that made us efficient, and then also stopping us from having to invest major amounts of money to be able to change our practices for an asset, to accommodate an asset that we don't own. So there is a compensation component of this, obviously, but a lot of these farmers, once again, especially around transmission lines, don't ask for these transmission lines to go through their property, and they don't want really the compensation. They just don't want to have the transmission line on their property where it's being announced.
How annoyed are farmers that, you know, the people pushing the hardest for renewable energy mainly live in inner city areas around Melbourne and Sydney, and they're never going to see any of this transmission lines and solar panels or even, you know, wind towers. They're just simply not going to see them. But the farmers are expected to just suck it up and have it rammed down their throat.
Well, this is the question we have to ask about how we constructing the nation. And we should be utilising the power where it's generated. If we're going to have wind and solar in rural areas, let's actually create the jobs in those areas so that we can utilise that asset and give the financial and economic stability and future for the rural communities, not transport it all and export it all down to the cities. If we came up with a bit more of a strategy around that and a bit more of a vision for how we use the renewables, then it's a different discussion. But at the moment, it's all about farmers hosting these assets for metro areas that don't have to look at them, don't have to manage them, don't have to go out there and fight a fire around them if there is a fire. But noting too that there are farmers out there, and I'm one of them, who actually hosts a wind farm, and we're quite happy for that to occur. But the question is, if we can generate more jobs out of that, how can we then make sure that the community benefits from it and it's not all just shut down the line to the nearest capital city?
Just before you go, we've had a very odd summer. The Bureau of Meteorology getting a bit of stick for telling us that it was all going to be, you know, very hot. It was going to be a long summer, and much of Australia was soaked in rain. I note, you know, I'm going to be down in on the River Murray tomorrow. It's going to be 40 degrees or 39 degrees on Sunday. But the bomb seems to have got this horribly wrong, David.
Well, this is the big dilemma too for agriculture. A lot of people made decisions around the forecast, and the forecast was for a very dry spring and early summer. And we did have one of the driest months within spring, but it wasn't the full picture. So for us, it is about the Bureau making sure that they communicate their strategy well. If the forecast change, that they get on their media lines and tell us that it's changed, because quite frankly, we shouldn't be green. You can probably see the green over my shoulder. It shouldn't be green this time of year for us here. We're usually brown and dry. We've had an exceptionally wet summer. The inputs that agriculture now is drawn down on, especially around managing the green bridge that we now have, has made supply lines challenging, and that makes it even harder for our retailers of agricultural produce to keep the products up to us, because they weren't expecting it either because of the forecast. So yes, I think there's something we can do better about making these forecasts more relevant. It's also for farmers then to understand that what the probability of a prediction is, but more so, if the BOM's going to make a prediction and it changes, which it did, they have to make sure that they communicate that change as much as they did the initial forecast, to unwind or make sure farmers are prepared for the alternative, because we haven't been. Our supply lines haven't been, and that has been really challenging, especially for livestock producers, but now also for grain producers with the inputs that we require.
Yeah, I must say the green was good to look at on the drive up from Melbourne to Sydney. David Jochinke, thank you very much, mate, for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you on a regular basis.